The water at Blackwood's Crossing ran dark that summer, darker than Wade Harlan remembered. He stood on the bank where the Platte River bent like a broken promise, staring at the place where a child had died in his arms 15 months ago. The boy's name was Ethan, 7 years old, light hair that caught the sun, a laugh that sounded like bells. Wade could still feel the weight of him, small and impossibly heavy, at the same time as the current pulled them both under. Wade had tried. God knows he had tried. His lungs had burned. His arms had fought the water. But the river was stronger, and the boy was gone before Wade could pull him to shore. When he finally dragged Ethan's body onto the muddy bank, the light was already leaving those blue eyes. Reverend Samuel Blackwood had been the one to find them. His only son dead, Wade Harlan alive and gasping. The Reverend had fallen to his knees in the mud, cradling Ethan's small body, and Wade had waited for the accusation. The rage, the righteous fury of a father who had lost everything. It never came. Instead, the Reverend had looked up at Wade with tears streaming down his face and said, "You tried to save him. That's all anyone can do. Try." Wade had left Kearney that same night. He couldn't bear the kindness, couldn't stand the forgiveness he didn't deserve. For 15 months he had drifted from town to town, ranch to ranch, carrying the weight of Ethan Blackwood's death like a stone in his chest. Every night he dreamed of the river. Every morning he woke reaching for a child who wasn't there. Now he was back. Not because he wanted to be, because he had received a letter 3 days ago delivered to a work camp in Wyoming where he'd been breaking horses for $1 a day. The handwriting was shaky but clear. "Mr. Harlan, my husband is dying. He has asked for you. Please come if you can find it in your heart. Margaret Blackwood." Wade had read the letter a dozen times before folding it carefully and placing it in his shirt pocket. He had told himself he wouldn't come, that showing his face in Kearney would only bring more pain to people who had suffered enough. But he owed the Reverend. He owed him more than he could ever repay. So here he was, standing at the crossing where it had all happened, watching the water move like it had never taken anything, like it didn't remember what it had done. Wade closed his eyes and saw Ethan's face again. That moment when the boy realized he couldn't reach the surface. The panic, the surrender, the terrible silence that followed. When Wade opened his eyes, the sun was lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the water. He should move, should get to town before dark. But his feet felt rooted to the earth, and the guilt felt heavier than gravity. That's when he saw them. 2 small figures sitting near the water's edge, maybe 30 yards downstream. Children. His heart seized in his chest. For a split second his mind showed him Ethan alive and well, playing by the river like he had that last day. But these weren't ghosts. These were real children. 2 girls, one larger than the other, sitting perfectly still in the fading light. Wade's first instinct was to turn around, to climb back on his horse and ride away from anything that reminded him of what he'd failed to protect. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the stillness of the scene. Maybe it was the way the smaller girl's head rested on the larger one's lap. Maybe it was the simple, terrible fact that children should not be sitting alone by a river at dusk. He walked toward them, slowly, boots crunching on the dry grass. As he got closer, he could see them more clearly. The older girl looked to be 8 or 9, with dark hair pulled back in a braid that had mostly come undone. Her dress was faded calico patched at the elbows. She sat with her back straight, watching the water with eyes that seemed too old for her face. The smaller girl, maybe 5, had golden curls and a round face still soft with baby fat. She was asleep, curled against her sister like a kitten seeking warmth. The older girl heard him coming. She turned her head slowly, and Wade stopped walking. There was no fear in her eyes, no surprise, just a kind of weary assessment, as if she was used to strangers approaching and had learned to measure their intentions quickly. Wade cleared his throat. He suddenly didn't know what to say. "Are you lost?" The words came out rougher than he intended. The girl didn't flinch. "No, sir. We're waiting for someone to come." Wade looked around. The road that ran past the crossing was empty. The nearest homestead was 3 miles back. The sun was dropping fast toward the horizon. "Who are you waiting for?" The girl's expression didn't change. "I don't know, but our papa said someone would come." Wade felt ice slide down his spine. "Where's your papa now?" He had to go. He's sick. Where did he go? The girl looked back at the water. He didn't say. Wade crouched down so he was at eye level with her. The movement made his knee crack, and he winced. The girl noticed, but said nothing. What's your name, Rose? This is my sister Violet. How long have you been sitting here, Rose, since morning? Wade looked at the sleeping child, then back at Rose. Since this morning, have you eaten? Rose gestured to a small cloth bag beside her. Papa left us some bread and water. Wade's jaw tightened. He had seen enough of the world to know what this was, what this looked like. A father who couldn't provide. Children left somewhere visible, somewhere they might be found. It happened more often than people wanted to admit, especially in hard times. But something didn't sit right. If the father wanted them found, why here, why a river crossing miles from town? Did your papa say anything else? Wade asked. Rose studied him for a long moment. Her eyes were green, sharp, searching. Finally she spoke. He said to wait here, to wait. He said someone good would come, and we should give them this. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. The edges were worn as if she'd been holding it all day. She held it out to Wade. Wade didn't take it. I'm not sure I'm the someone your papa meant. Rose's hand didn't waver. You're here, aren't you? Wade looked at the letter, then at Rose's face. There was something in her expression, something fierce and fragile at the same time that made him reach out and take the paper. He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was cramped and uneven, written by someone whose hands weren't steady. To whoever finds my daughters. Their names are Rose and Violet Carter. I am their father, Thomas Carter, and I am dying. I have no means to care for them, and no family to take them. If you have any kindness in your heart, please see them to safety. Take them to the church in Kearney. Reverend Blackwood will know what to do. I pray God forgives me for this. Thomas Carter. Wade read it twice. Then he folded it and looked at Rose. Your papa thinks he's dying. Rose nodded. He has the black sickness in his leg. It's been spreading, Gangrene Wade thought. If it was advanced, the man had days, maybe a week. And he left you here alone. He said someone would come. Rose's voice was steady, but Wade heard the tremor underneath. He said it would be today. Wade stood up, his mind racing. The sun was almost touching the horizon. In an hour it would be full dark. These girls couldn't stay here overnight, and he couldn't leave them. But taking them meant going to Kearney, meant facing the town that knew him as the man who had failed to save Ethan Blackwood, meant walking back into the life he'd spent 15 months running from. Wade looked down at Rose again. She was watching him with those two old eyes, waiting for him to make a choice. The sleeping child Violet stirred slightly and murmured something in her sleep, and Wade saw it then. Saw Ethan's face superimposed over Violet's, saw the same vulnerability, the same innocent trust that the world would keep them safe. He had failed one child. The river had taken Ethan despite everything Wade had done to save him. But these children weren't in the water. They were on solid ground, and he was here. He was standing right here, and he had a choice. I'll take you to Kearney, Wade said quietly. To the church, like your papa said. Rose's shoulders dropped slightly as if she'd been holding her breath. Thank you, sir. Wade moved to wake Violet, but Rose stopped him with a hand on his arm. Wait, there's something I need to ask first. Wade paused. What Rose looked at him intently. Are you running away from something? The question hit Wade like a fist. He opened his mouth to deny it, to ask what business it was of hers, but something in her eyes stopped him. This child had learned to read people the way most children learn to read books. She would know if he lied. Yes, Wade said finally. I am. Rose nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. So are we. Wade felt something shift in his chest. Some recognition, some understanding that passed between them without words. They were both running, both waiting, both hoping that someone somewhere would choose to stay instead of walking away. Rose gently shook her sister awake. Violet's eyes fluttered open, confused and cloudy with sleep. Time to go, Letty Rose said softly. This man is going to help us. Violet looked up at Wade with wide blue eyes. Are you Papa No Honey? Wade set his throat tight. I'm just someone who stopped. And that was true. That was all he was. Someone who had stopped running long enough to see two children who needed help. But as he lifted Violet onto his horse and helped Rose climb up behind her, Wade couldn't shake the feeling that stopping here at this river on this day was going to change everything. They rode into Kearney as the last light was dying. The town looked exactly as Wade remembered. Main Street with its false-fronted buildings, the general store with its paint peeling, the saloon where piano music drifted out into the evening air, the church with its white steeple rising against the darkening sky. People turned to stare as they passed. Wade kept his hat pulled low, but he knew they recognized him. News traveled fast in small towns, and a man who'd let the Reverend's son drown would be remembered. He heard whispers, saw fingers pointing, felt the weight of judgment pressing down like heat. But he kept riding Violet in front of him, Rose's arms wrapped around his waist to keep from falling. The girls needed help. Whatever these people thought of him didn't matter right now. Wade stopped in front of the boarding house run by Mrs. Murphy. It was the closest thing to neutral ground he could think of. The church would come later after he'd gotten the girls settled. He dismounted and helped the girls down. Rose stood close to Violet, protective even now. Wade tied his horse and walked up the steps to knock on the door. Mrs. Murphy answered. She was a solid woman in her 60s, with iron-gray hair pulled back severe and eyes that missed nothing. When she saw Wade, her expression hardened. "We're full," she said flatly. "I'm not here for a room for myself," Wade said. "These girls need a place to stay. Their father left them. They need food and beds and someone to watch over them until I can sort this out." Mrs. Murphy looked past Wade to where Rose and Violet stood on the steps. Her expression softened slightly. "Carter girls," Wade was surprised. "You know them, know of them. Thomas Carter's been struggling since his wife died. Word was he'd taken sick." Mrs. Murphy's eyes moved back to Wade. "And you are Wade Harlan." The name hung in the air between them. Mrs. Murphy's face went carefully blank. "I see. You've got nerve coming back here, Harlan. I know, but these girls need help tonight. Whatever you think of me, don't take it out on them." Mrs. Murphy was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed and stepped aside. "Bring them in. I'll get them fed and settled." She pointed a finger at Wade. "But you stay where I can see you. I don't trust men who run away." Wade nodded and gestured for the girls to come inside. Rose took Violet's hand and led her past Mrs. Murphy into the warmth of the boarding house. Wade followed, feeling the weight of the woman's suspicion like a hand on his shoulder. The boarding house smelled of lye soap and cooking oil. Mrs. Murphy led them to a small room on the first floor, barely big enough for the narrow bed inside. "They can share this tonight. I'll bring up some stew and bread." Mrs. Murphy looked at the girls. "You two wash your hands and faces. Basin's on the dresser." As the girls moved to obey, Mrs. Murphy pulled Wade aside into the hallway. "What's your plan here, Harlan?" Wade kept his voice low. "Their father's letter said to bring them to Reverend Blackwood. I'm going to do that." Mrs. Murphy's face went pale. "You don't know. Don't know what?" "The Reverend. He's dying. Had a stroke 2 weeks ago. He's bedridden, can't speak, barely conscious most days." Wade felt the ground shift under him. The letter. Mrs. Blackwood's letter. It had said her husband was dying, but Wade had been so focused on the guilt of facing the Reverend that he hadn't really processed it. "Is there someone else?" Wade asked. "Someone who handles orphans or children who need help. Used to be the church. Now," Mrs. Murphy shrugged. "Sheriff might know, or the territorial judge when she comes through, but that could be weeks." Wade ran a hand through his hair. "Weeks. These girls couldn't wait weeks." "There's one other person who might help," Mrs. Murphy said slowly, "though I'm not sure if that's a blessing or a curse." "Who?" "Silas Crawford. Runs the big ranch north of town. He takes in orphans sometimes, puts them to work, but he feeds them and houses them." Wade nodded. "I'll talk to him tomorrow." Mrs. Murphy's hand caught his arm. "Harlan, be careful with Crawford. He's not what he seems." Before Wade could ask what she meant, footsteps sounded on the stairs. A man appeared at the top, descending slowly. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of clothes that spoke of money. His face was lined with grief, the kind that settles into a person's bones and never quite leaves. "Mrs. Murphy," the man said as he reached the bottom, "I heard there were Carter girls brought into town." "Is it true?" Mrs. Murphy's grip tightened on Wade's arm. "It's true, Mr. Crawford." The man's eyes found Wade. "And who are you, Wade Harlan?" Crawford's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Judgment. Something else Wade couldn't quite name. "You're the one who brought them in." "Yes, sir." Crawford looked toward the room where the girls were. "May I see them?" Wade stepped in front of the door. "With respect, sir, I don't know who you are. I'm not letting strangers near them until I understand what's happening here." Crawford's mouth tightened. "That's fair. My name is Silas Crawford. I own the Matthias Ranch, and those girls are my granddaughters." The words hit Wade like a physical blow. "Your granddaughters?" Crawford nodded slowly. "Their mother was my daughter, Catherine. She died 3 years ago when the youngest was born." Wade's mind raced. If Crawford was their grandfather, he had rights. Blood rights. Legal rights. "Why didn't you take them in when their mother died?" Wade asked. Crawford's face went tight with pain. "Thomas Carter wouldn't let me near them. He blamed me for Catherine's death, said I worked her too hard on the ranch while she was carrying. He took the girls and disappeared. I've been looking for them ever since." Mrs. Murphy's hand fell away from Wade's arm. She looked between the two men, understanding dawning. "You want to take them," Mrs. Murphy said. "That's why you're here." "I want to give them a home," Crawford corrected. "A real home. With family. Not some stranger who happened to find them by the roadside." The words stung, but Wade couldn't argue with them. He was a stranger. Crawford was family. "I'd like to see them," Crawford said again. "Please." Wade looked at Mrs. Murphy. She gave a small nod. Wade knocked on the door. "Rose, there's someone here who wants to meet you." The door opened. Rose stood there, Violet behind her. When Rose saw Crawford, something happened to her face. It went very still, very careful. "Hello, Rose," Crawford said softly. "Do you remember me?" Rose's hand found Violet's and gripped tight. "Your grandfather Crawford, that's right." Crawford took a step forward. "I've been looking for you and your sister for a long time." Violet peeked around Rose, curious. "Are you our mama's papa?" "I am, sweetheart." Crawford's voice broke slightly. "You look just like her." Rose didn't move. Her body was tense, coiled like a spring. Wade saw it and felt his instincts prickling. "Mr. Crawford would like to talk with you," Wade said carefully. "Is that all right?" Rose looked up at Wade. There was something in her eyes, a plea, a warning. "Can you stay?" she asked Wade. "Of course." They sat in the small room. Crawford pulled up a chair. Mrs. Murphy brought stew and bread, and the girls ate while Crawford asked gentle questions. Where had they been living? How was their father? Were they being treated well? Rose answered carefully, revealing little. Violet was more open, telling Crawford about the pretty flowers they'd seen by the river, about how Papa had sung them a song before he left. With each word, Wade watched Crawford's face. The man seemed genuinely moved. His eyes were wet when Violet mentioned the song. When the girls finished eating, Crawford stood. "I have a proposal," he said, looking at Wade. "Let them stay here tonight. Tomorrow I'll come back and we can discuss their future properly. I want to do this right, legal and proper." Wade nodded slowly. "That seems fair." Crawford moved toward the door, then stopped. He looked back at Rose. "I loved your mother very much," he said quietly. "And I love you. Both of you. I know you don't remember me well, but I hope you'll give me a chance to be family again." Rose said nothing. Crawford left his footsteps heavy on the stairs. When he was gone, Mrs. Murphy began clearing the dishes. Wade stood to help, but Rose's voice stopped him. "Mr. Harlan, can I talk to you alone?" Wade looked at Mrs. Murphy. She nodded and took Violet with her to get the child ready for bed. When they were alone, Rose moved to the window. She stared out at the dark street. "You can't let him take us." Wade moved closer. "Rose, he's your grandfather. He has rights." Rose turned, and Wade saw tears on her face for the first time. "You don't understand. Papa didn't leave us because he was dying." "What do you mean?" Rose's voice dropped to a whisper. "Grandfather Crawford found us. 2 weeks ago he came to our camp and told Papa he wanted us back. Papa said no. They fought. Grandfather said if Papa didn't hand us over, he'd use the law. He'd say Papa was unfit. He'd have Papa arrested for keeping us from family." Wade's chest tightened. What happened then? Papa was scared. He's been sick, getting sicker. He knew he couldn't fight Grandfather in court, didn't have money for lawyers. So they made a deal. What kind of deal? Rose's tears came faster now. Papa would leave us somewhere public, somewhere we'd be found. Grandfather would wait a few days, then claim us legally. That way, it would look like Papa abandoned us and Grandfather rescued us. Papa thought maybe if we were found by someone good first, that person might help us, might keep us away from Grandfather. Wade felt sick. Your father sold you to Crawford. Rose shook her head violently. Papa didn't want to. But Grandfather threatened him, said he'd have Papa put in jail, said we'd end up in an orphanage anyway if Papa didn't cooperate. At least this way Grandfather said we'd be with family. Why don't you want to be with your grandfather? Wade asked. Has he hurt you? No, not like that. Rose wiped her face. But Mama used to tell us stories about how Grandfather worked her so hard, how he cared more about his ranch than about people, how he wanted to control everything. Wade knelt down so he was eye level with Rose. Listen to me. I understand you're scared, but I'm nobody. I have no legal right to you. Crawford is your blood family. A court would give him custody in a heartbeat. Then don't let it go to court. Rose grabbed his hands. Please. Papa said someone good would come. He believed it. He left us at that river because he believed. Wade thought about the river, about how Thomas had chosen that specific spot, the same place where Ethan had died, the same crossing where Wade had been standing when he saw the girls. Had it been chance, or had Thomas Carter somehow known Rose? I can't promise anything. You already did, Rose said simply. When you stopped, when you brought us here, you made a choice. Wade wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come, because she was right. He had made a choice. He'd stopped running long enough to help, and now these children were counting on him. I'll figure something out, he said finally, but I need time. Rose nodded. How much time I don't know. He doesn't have much patience, Grandfather. Rose's voice was flat. He'll want us soon. Wade stood. Let me talk to some people tomorrow, see what options there are. And if there aren't any options, Wade looked at this child who had already learned that the world didn't always offer good choices. Then we'll make some. After Rose went to bed, Wade walked through the dark streets to the church. He hadn't been planning to go there tonight. Had meant to wait until morning. But something pulled him forward, some need to face the man he'd wronged before he could think about helping anyone else. The church was dark except for a single lamp burning in the parsonage beside it. Wade knocked quietly. Mrs. Margaret Blackwood answered. She was younger than her husband, maybe 50, with kind eyes and worry lines etched deep around her mouth. When she saw Wade, her hand went to her heart. Mr. Harlan, you came. Your letter said he was asking for me. Margaret stepped aside to let him in. He is, though he can't speak. The stroke took his voice. Can he understand? Yes. He knows you're here. I told him you'd come. You'd come when I saw you riding into town earlier. Wade followed her through the small house to a bedroom at the back. Reverend Samuel Blackwood lay in the bed, his body thin under the quilts. His face was slack on one side, his right arm curled uselessly against his chest. But his left eye was open, clear, aware. Samuel Margaret said gently, Wade Harlan is here. The Reverend's eye found Wade. Something moved in his expression. Not anger, not accusation. Something softer. Wade moved to the bedside. He had rehearsed what he would say during 15 months of running. All the apologies, all the explanations, all the desperate pleas for forgiveness. But now standing here, the words wouldn't come. All he could manage was the truth. I'm sorry. I tried to save him. I tried so hard. The Reverend's left hand moved slowly toward a slate board on the bedside table. Margaret handed it to him along with a piece of chalk. With painstaking care, the Reverend wrote, I know. Wade's vision blurred. You know, the Reverend wrote again, each letter an effort. He forgave you before he died. Wade felt something crack inside his chest. How do you know that? The Reverend's hand shook as he wrote the final message. He told me, said the man tried, said be kind. Wade's legs gave out. He collapsed into the chair beside the bed, tears streaming down his face. For 15 months, he had carried the weight of Ethan's death like a millstone around his neck. Had convinced himself that he was beyond forgiveness, beyond redemption. And all this time the boy had forgiven him, The Father had forgiven him. "When will you forgive yourself?" Margaret asked softly. Wade couldn't answer, didn't know how. The Reverend reached out with his left hand and gripped Wade's arm. The touch was weak but steady, intentional. "You have a chance now," Margaret said. "Those Carter girls need someone. My husband can't help them anymore. But you can." Wade wiped his face. "Their grandfather wants them." "Silas Crawford," Margaret's voice hardened. "That man cares about property, not people. If he wants those girls, it's because they're useful to him, somehow. He says he loves them. Maybe he does. But love isn't always enough. Sometimes love is selfish." She looked at her husband. "And sometimes love is letting go." The Reverend's hand tightened on Wade's arm. His eye held Wade's fierce despite the ravaged body. "You want me to fight for them?" Wade said. "Don't you?" The Reverend couldn't nod, couldn't speak, but the answer was in his eyes. "I don't know how," Wade said. "I'm nobody. I have nothing." The Reverend released his arm and picked up the chalk again, wrote 3 words. "You are here." Wade looked at those words for a long time. You are here, present, not running, not hiding. It wasn't much, but maybe it was enough to start. Wade left the parsonage near midnight. The town was dark and quiet. He walked back toward the boarding house, his mind turning over everything that had happened. He was halfway there when a voice spoke from the shadows. "Mr. Harlan, a moment of your time." Wade turned. Silas Crawford stepped into the lamplight from the saloon across the street. "Mr. Crawford, I wanted to speak with you, away from the girls." Crawford's voice was calm, reasonable, man to man. "All right." Crawford gestured to a bench outside the general store. They sat, the night air cool around them. "I know what Rose told you," Crawford said without preamble. Wade kept his face neutral. "What did she tell me? That her father and I had an arrangement, that I pressured Thomas into giving up the girls." Crawford looked at Wade. "Is that about right?" Wade said nothing. Crawford sighed. "It's true. All of it. I did threaten Thomas. I did force his hand." He looked down at his hands. "Does that make me a monster?" "That depends on why you did it." Crawford was quiet for a moment. "My daughter died in my house, Mr. Harlan. In my bed. She'd been working in the fields that day, pregnant and struggling because I told her the ranch needed every hand. When her labor started, it was too fast, too violent. She bled to death before the doctor could get there." "I'm sorry," Wade said quietly. "Thomas was right to blame me. I killed her with my greed, my ambition." Crawford's voice broke. "I've lived with that for 3 years. And those girls are all I have left of her, so you want them to ease your guilt." Crawford looked at him sharply. "Is that so wrong, to want to make things right?" "Depends on what's right for them, not what's right for you. And you think you know what's right for them." Crawford's tone hardened. "You're a drifter, a man who let a child die. You have nothing to offer those girls." "I have time," Wade said. "I have attention. I have the willingness to put them first." "For how long? A week? A month?" Crawford leaned forward. "I can give them a home, Mr. Harlan, education, a future. What can you give them?" Wade thought about Ethan, about the river, about 15 months of running from the one thing he should have faced. "I can give them someone who stays," he said finally. "Someone who doesn't walk away when it gets hard." "Noble words," Crawford said. "But words don't feed children. Don't clothe them, don't protect them. Neither does guilt." Crawford stood. "You're making a mistake, Harlan. I'm their family. I have legal rights. You have nothing." Wade stood as well. "Then I guess we'll see what the law says." Crawford's expression went cold. "Yes, I suppose we will." He turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. I know you went to see the Reverend tonight. I know he's dying. And I know he was the only person in this town who believed in you. When he's gone, you'll have no allies here, no one to speak for you." Wade felt the threat in those words. "I don't need allies, I just need to do what's right." Crawford smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The road to hell is paved with good intentions, Mr. Harlan. Let's hope yours don't lead those girls there." He walked away, disappearing into the darkness. Wade stood alone in the empty street, feeling the weight of everything that had just been set in motion. He had made promises he didn't know if he could keep, had taken on a fight he didn't know if he could win. But as he looked up at the window where Rose and Violet slept, he knew he couldn't walk away. Not this time. The river had taken one child from him. He'd be damned if he let a broken system take two more. Wade walked back to the boarding house and knocked on Mrs. Murphy's door. She answered in her nightclothes, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "I need a room," Wade said. "I'm staying in Kearney." Mrs. Murphy studied his face. "For how long?" "As long as it takes." She opened the door wider. "I have a small room in the back. It's not much. It's enough." That night Wade lay in a narrow bed in a town that had every reason to hate him, and he made himself a promise. He would fight for those girls, not because it would redeem him, not because it would wash away his guilt, but because they deserved someone who would choose them, who would stay. And maybe in learning to protect them, he would finally learn to forgive himself. The ghosts we carry don't disappear. They walk beside us, reminding us of what we've lost, what we've failed to save. But sometimes, if we're lucky, they also remind us that we still have chances, still have choices. Wade closed his eyes and saw Ethan's face one last time, not drowning, not dying, but smiling the way he had before the river took him. And then Wade saw Rose's face, Violet's face, two children who needed him to be stronger than his past. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Crawford would make his move. The law would have its say, but tonight Wade Harlan was exactly where he needed to be, present, not running, ready to fight. And sometimes that was all the redemption a broken man could hope for. Morning came to Kearney with the kind of light that made everything look fragile. Wade stood at his window watching the sun climb over the false-fronted buildings, painting long shadows across the dirt street. He had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Rose's face, heard her whispered plea. "You can't let him take us." He had made a promise in the dark. Now in the daylight, he had to figure out how to keep it. Wade dressed in his cleanest shirt and walked downstairs. Mrs. Murphy was already in the kitchen, flour dusting her hands as she kneaded bread. She looked up when he entered. "Coffee's on the stove. Help yourself." Wade poured a cup and stood by the window looking out at the street beginning to wake. A wagon rolled past. A dog barked somewhere. Normal sounds of a normal day, except nothing about this day would be normal. "The girls still sleeping?" Wade asked. "For now." Mrs. Murphy punched the dough with more force than necessary. "You know Crawford's going to move fast. He's not a patient man." "I know. And you know you don't have a legal leg to stand on." Wade took a sip of coffee. It was strong and bitter. "I know that too." Mrs. Murphy stopped kneading and looked at him. "So what's your plan?" "Find a way to prove I can provide for them. Find work. Find a place to live, show the court I'm capable." "In how much time?" Mrs. Murphy's voice was sharp but not unkind. "Crawford will file papers today. You'll have a hearing within the week, maybe two if you're lucky. You think you can build a whole life in 2 weeks?" Wade set his cup down. "I have to try, Mrs." Murphy wiped her hands on her apron and came closer. Her voice dropped. "Listen to me, Harlan. I don't know what happened with the Reverend's boy. I don't know if you're a good man or a bad one trying to be better. But those girls upstairs trust you. I saw it in Rose's eyes last night. That kind of trust is rare and precious. Don't break it unless you're absolutely sure you can't keep it." "I won't break it," Wade said. "Then you'd better be ready for war, because Crawford doesn't lose." "Not in business, not in court, not in anything." Wade met her eyes. "Everyone loses eventually." Before Mrs. Murphy could respond, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Rose appeared holding Violet's hand. The younger girl's hair was a tangle of golden curls, her dress wrinkled from sleep. But Rose looked alert, watchful, as if she had not slept either. "Good morning," Wade said. Rose nodded. "Is grandfather coming today?" "Probably." Rose's hand tightened on Violet's. "What are you going to do?" Wade knelt down so he was at their level. "I'm going to find work. I'm going to talk to people who might help. And I'm going to make sure you're safe while I do it." Violet looked at Wade with those wide blue eyes. "Are you our papa now?" The question struck Wade in the chest. "No, honey, I'm not your papa, but I'm someone who's going to look out for you, like a friend," Violet asked. Wade glanced at Rose. Her face was carefully neutral, but he saw the hope hiding there. "Yes, like a friend." Mrs. Murphy brought out breakfast, eggs and toast and the bread she had been making. The girls ate slowly, carefully, like children who had learned not to waste food. Wade watched them and felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper into his bones. After breakfast, Wade walked to the general store. He needed information about who might be hiring, who might offer him a chance despite his reputation. The store was run by a man named Hewitt, thin and nervous, who looked at Wade like he might steal something. "I'm looking for work," Wade said. "Any kind. I can do ranch handwork, carpentry, hauling. Anything honest." Hewitt shook his head before Wade finished speaking. "Can't help you. Nobody's hiring right now." Wade knew it was a lie. He had seen help wanted signs in 3 windows on his way here, but arguing would not change anything. "If you hear of anything," Wade said carefully, "I'm staying at Mrs. Murphy's boarding house." Hewitt turned back to his inventory without answering. Wade tried the livery stable next, the blacksmith shop, the freight company. Everywhere he went, the answer was the same. "No work available. Come back another time. We'll keep you in mind." By noon, Wade understood what was happening. Crawford had already spread the word. No one would hire the man who wanted to keep Crawford's granddaughters from him. Wade stood in the middle of the street, sun beating down, and felt the trap closing around him. Without work, he could not prove he could provide for the girls. Without that proof, he would lose them in court. He was turning to head back to the boarding house when a voice called out, "Mr. Harlan?" Wade turned. A woman stood in the doorway of the church, silhouetted against the dim interior. She stepped into the light, and Wade saw her clearly. Mid-20s, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, wire-rimmed spectacles perched on a sharp nose. She wore a plain gray dress that had been mended multiple times. "Yes, ma'am, I'm Mary Ann Whitfield, the new school teacher." The woman's voice was crisp, educated with a faint Boston accent underneath. "I heard you're looking for work." Wade approached cautiously. "Word travels fast. It's a small town, Mr. Harlan." Mary Ann studied him with cool gray eyes. "I also heard you're trying to care for the Carter girls." "That's right." "Why?" The question caught Wade off guard. "Because they need help. There's an orphanage in Omaha. They could go there. They could," Wade said. "But they shouldn't have to." Mary Ann's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Approval, maybe, or recognition. "Why are you telling me this?" Wade asked. "Because I teach Rose and Violet 3 days a week. They come to the church for lessons along with the other children in town." Mary Ann paused. "And because I know what it's like to need help and not receive it." Wade waited. "The church needs a groundskeeper," Mary Ann continued. "Someone to maintain the building, tend the cemetery, chop wood, do repairs. Reverend Blackwood used to do it himself, but now," she trailed off, "the position pays $25 a month. There's a small room in the back of the church where you could stay." Wade felt hope flicker in his chest. "Why are you offering this?" "Because Mrs. Blackwood asked me to. She said her husband would have wanted it." Mary Ann's voice softened slightly. "And because those girls deserve someone who fights for them." "I'll take it," Wade said. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The work is hard and the pay is poor. And people will talk about you working at the church where she stopped herself, where the Reverend's son died. Let them talk." Mary Ann nodded once, sharp and final. "You start tomorrow morning. Be here at dawn." She turned to go back into the church, but Wade's voice stopped her. "Miss Whitfield, why are you really helping me?" Mary Ann looked back over her shoulder. Her face was unreadable behind those spectacles. "Because sometimes strangers are kinder than family, Mr. Harlan. I've learned that lesson the hard way." Then she was gone, leaving Wade standing in the street with the first piece of hope he had felt since arriving in Kearney. Wade went back to the boarding house and found Rose and Violet in the small parlor. Rose was reading to her sister from a worn book, her voice steady and clear. Violet listened with rapt attention, occasionally interrupting to ask questions. When Rose saw Wade, she stopped reading. "Did you find work?" "I did. At the church. I'll be the groundskeeper." Rose's shoulders relaxed slightly. "That's good." Violet bounced up. "Can we visit you there?" Wade smiled. "I think that can be arranged." That afternoon, Crawford came. Wade heard the knock and opened the door himself. Crawford stood on the porch dressed in a fine suit, hat in hand, the picture of respectability. "Mr. Harlan, I'd like to speak with my granddaughters if you don't mind." Wade did mind, but he had no legal right to refuse. "The girls are in the parlor. I'll be staying with them." Crawford's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Of course. They sat in the cramped parlor, an awkward arrangement of adults and children, trying to navigate impossible terrain. Crawford had brought gifts, a rag doll for Violet, a book for Rose. The girls accepted them with quiet thank yous, but Rose's posture remained stiff-guarded. "I want to talk to you about your future," Crawford said gently. "I have a beautiful home, plenty of room for both of you. Good food, warm beds, and I could hire a tutor to make sure you get proper schooling." Violet looked interested. "Do you have horses?" "Dozens of them." Crawford's face softened. "Your mother used to love the horses. She had a favorite, a gray mare named Silver. She's still there, getting old now, but gentle as can be." Rose said nothing. "I know you're scared," Crawford continued, looking at Rose. "I know your father told you things about me. Some of them might even be true. But I've changed, Rose. Losing your mother taught me what matters, and what matters is family." "We have family," Rose said quietly. "We have Mr. Harlan." Crawford's expression hardened for just a moment before smoothing out again. "Mr. Harlan is a kind man who helped you, but he's not family. He's not blood. Mama used to say, 'Blood doesn't make family,'" Rose said. "Love does. Your mother was wise." Crawford leaned forward, but she also understood that children need stability, security, things I can provide that Mr. Harlan cannot. Wade wanted to interrupt to argue, but he forced himself to stay silent. This was between Crawford and the girls. "I'll be filing papers with the territorial court tomorrow," Crawford said. "There will be a hearing in about 2 weeks. The judge will decide what's best for you." "What if we tell the judge we want to stay with Mr. Harlan?" Rose asked. Crawford's smile was sad. "Then the judge will consider that. But she'll also consider what's practical, what's legal. And legally, I'm your closest living relative." After Crawford left, Rose sat very still on the sofa, the book he had given her unopened in her lap. Violet played with her new doll, oblivious to the tension. Wade sat beside Rose. "You all right?" Rose shook her head. "He's going to win, isn't he?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do." Rose looked at him with those two old eyes. "You know he has more money, more power, more everything." "What do you have?" Wade thought about it. "I have time to give you. Attention, the willingness to listen." "That's not enough," Rose whispered. "Not in court." Wade wished he could tell her she was wrong, but he had a terrible feeling she was right. That evening, Wade moved his few belongings to the small room behind the church. It was barely larger than a closet, with a narrow cot, a washstand, and a single window that looked out onto the cemetery. But it was his, and it came with honest work. Mrs. Blackwood met him there with fresh linens and a lamp. Her face was drawn with exhaustion and grief, but her eyes were kind. "Thank you for taking this on," she said. "Samuel would be glad to know you're here. How is he today?" "The same." She folded the linens on the cot with careful precision. "The doctor says it could be days or weeks. There's no way to know." "I'm sorry," Wade said. "Don't be. We've had 30 good years together. That's more than many people get." She paused. "What you're doing for those girls, it's what Samuel would have wanted. He believed in second chances." Wade looked out the window at the rows of graves. "Even for someone like me, especially for someone like you." Mrs. Blackwood touched his arm gently. "The ones who know they're broken are the ones most likely to heal." After she left, Wade stood in his small room and let the silence settle around him. He could see Ethan's grave from his window, a small headstone with a carved lamb. Fresh flowers lay at its base. Someone, probably Mrs. Blackwood, still tended it. Wade had been running from that grave for 15 months. Now he would see it every day, face it every morning and every evening. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, he felt something close to peace. The next morning, Wade woke before dawn and began his work. The church needed everything: loose shingles repaired, weeds pulled from around the foundation, the cemetery fence mended, firewood chopped and stacked for winter. Wade threw himself into the labor with an intensity that surprised him. Every nail he hammered felt like a small act of penance. Every weed he pulled felt like clearing space for something new to grow. He was working in the cemetery repairing a section of fence when he heard footsteps. He looked up to see Mary Ann approaching with a basket covered by a cloth. "Mrs. Blackwood asked me to bring you lunch," she said, setting the basket on a nearby headstone. "Thank you." Marianne did not leave. She stood watching him work, her expression thoughtful. "You're good at this," she observed. "I've done a lot of fence work. That's not what I meant." Marianne gestured at the cemetery. "You're not afraid to be here." Wade drove another nail home. "Should I be? Most people are uncomfortable in cemeteries. They avoid looking at the graves, hurry through when they have to visit. But you," she paused, "you look at them, like you're paying respect." Wade moved to the next broken section. "I have reason to." Marianne was quiet for a moment. "Ethan Blackwood." Wade's hand stilled. "You know about that." "Everyone knows about that, Mr. Harlan. It's a small town." Marianne's voice held no judgment, just statement of fact. "They say you tried to save him. I failed. You tried. That's what Mrs. Blackwood told me. She said you nearly drowned trying to pull him out. Nearly doesn't count." Marianne stepped closer. Her voice was soft but firm. "I knew a girl in Boston, 12 years old. Her father beat her mother every night. One night the girl tried to stop him, stood between them with a kitchen knife and told him to leave. He left. But 2 days later he came back with a gun and shot them both. The mother died. The girl survived." Wade looked at her. "That girl was you." Marianne's face did not change. "The point is, Mr. Harlan, sometimes we try to save people and fail. That doesn't make the trying worthless. What happened to your father?" "He went to prison. Hanged 6 months later." Marianne's voice was flat, emotionless. "The court called it justice. I call it too late. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm only telling you so you understand that I know what failure feels like. I know what it means to carry someone's death with you." She met his eyes. "But I also know that we can't let the dead define us. We have to live for the living." Wade thought about Rose and Violet. "Is that why you're helping me?" "For the living." Marianne adjusted her spectacles, a nervous gesture that seemed out of place on someone so composed. "I'm helping you because I believe children deserve advocates." And because she stopped. "Because why?" "Because I know what it's like to need help and have no one offer it." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "And I won't be the kind of person who walks past someone drowning." The word drowning hung in the air between them. Wade set down his hammer. "Miss Whitfield, are you in some kind of trouble?" Marianne's face went very still. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you flinch when wagons come down the street. Because you watch the road like you're expecting someone. Because you're in a town like Kearney when someone with your education could be teaching in Omaha or Denver." Marianne's hands clenched in her skirts. "I should go if you need help," Wade said quietly. "I'm offering. You can barely help yourself, mister." "Harlan, how could you possibly help me? I don't know, but the offer stands." Marianne looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away, her back straight and rigid with tension. Wade went back to his work, but his mind turned over the conversation. Marianne Whitfield was running from something. He recognized it because he had been running too, and people who ran long enough eventually got caught. The question was, what would happen when whatever she was running from finally found her? Days passed. Wade fell into a rhythm. Work at the church from dawn until mid-afternoon. Visit with Rose and Violet for a few hours. More work until dark. The labor was hard but satisfying. His hands, soft from months of drifting, grew calloused again. His back ached, but it was honest pain. Rose and Violet came to see him every day. Rose would read while Wade worked, her voice carrying across the cemetery. Violet would pick wildflowers and place them on graves, singing little songs to herself. One afternoon, Wade was replacing broken boards on the church steps when Violet asked him a question. "Mr. Wade, do dead people get lonely?" Wade paused, considering how to answer. "I don't think so, honey. I think they have each other, even the ones with no family, especially those ones. I think they make new family, like we're doing." Violet seemed satisfied with this answer. She went back to her flowers. Rose looked up from her book. "Do you really believe that Wade hammered in another nail?" "I want to believe it. That's not the same thing." "No, it's not." Rose closed her book. "Papa used to say wanting something doesn't make it real. Your papa was right. But sometimes wanting something is the first step to making it real." Rose thought about this. "Is that what you're doing? Making us into family because you want to?" Wade set down his hammer and looked at her. "I'm trying. I don't know if it'll work, but I'm trying." "That's what Papa said too," Rose said quietly. before he left. The words stung, but Wade did not look away. "I'm not your Papa Rose, and I can't promise I won't fail you, but I can promise I won't stop trying." Rose's eyes were wet, but she did not cry. That's more than most people promise. That evening, as Wade was locking up the church, Mary Ann appeared again. This time she looked different. Her hair was down loose around her shoulders, her face was pale, and there was a bruise on her wrist that she tried to hide beneath her sleeve. Wade saw it anyway. "What happened?" he asked, stepping toward her. Mary Ann pulled her sleeve down further. "Nothing. I fell. Don't lie to me." Mary Ann's face crumpled. Then she straightened, fighting for composure. "I need your help. Anything. I need a place to stay, just for tonight. Maybe a few nights. I can't—" She stopped, her voice breaking. "I can't go back to the boarding house." Wade did not hesitate. "You can stay in the church. There's a small room upstairs where we store hymnals. It has a cot. People will talk. Let them." Mary Ann looked at him with something like desperation. "You don't understand. If people see me staying here with you, it will ruin any chance you have of keeping the girls. Crawford will use it against you. Then we'll be careful." Wade's voice was firm. "But I'm not leaving you to whatever put that bruise on your wrist." Mary Ann's hand went to her wrist instinctively. "How did you know it was a person? Because accidents don't leave finger-shaped bruises." Mary Ann sat down hard on the church steps. Her whole body was shaking. "He found me. I thought I had more time, but he found me." "Who found you, my husband?" The word hit Wade like a fist. "You're married legally, yes." Mary Ann's voice was hollow. "His name is Charles Hendrick. We were married in Boston 2 years ago. It was arranged by our families. My father owed his father money. The marriage settled the debt." Wade sat beside her. "And he hurt you. Every day." Mary Ann's tears came now quiet and unstoppable. "He said it was his right, that a wife should obey. When I ran 6 months ago, I thought I could disappear, but he hired men to find me, and now he's here." "Where is he now?" "At the hotel. He came to see me today, told me I have until tomorrow to pack my things. Then we're going back to Boston." She looked at Wade. "If I refuse, he'll have me arrested. A wife who abandons her husband can be charged with desertion. I'll go to jail or an asylum." Wade's hands clenched. "There has to be a way." "There isn't. The law is on his side." Mary Ann wiped her face. "I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have involved you. You have enough problems." Wade stood. "Come with me." He led her into the church and up the narrow stairs to the storage room. It was dusty and cramped, but there was a cot and a window. He lit a lamp. "You stay here tonight. Tomorrow we figure out what to do." "There's nothing to do," Mary Ann said. Unless she stopped. "Unless what?" "Unless I can prove the marriage was invalid. That he coerced me, that there were grounds for annulment." Mary Ann sat on the cot, "But that would require a lawyer, money, time I don't have." "What if you remarried?" Wade asked. "Would that change anything?" Mary Ann looked at him strangely. "Bigamy is illegal, Mr. Harlan. I can't marry someone else while still married to Charles. But if the first marriage was annulled, then yes. If I married someone else, Charles would have no claim. But we just established that annulment is impossible." Wade paced the small room. His mind was turning over possibilities, each one more desperate than the last. "What if you didn't annul it? What if you just—" He paused. "What if you married me anyway?" Mary Ann stared at him. "That's insane." "Is it? If you're married to me even illegally, it complicates things for Hendrick, gives you protection while you fight for annulment." "And ruins your custody case," Mary Ann said sharply. "The moment Crawford finds out you married a woman who's already married, he'll use it to paint you as morally corrupt. You'll lose Rose and Violet." Wade stopped pacing. "Maybe. Or maybe it shows I'm willing to build a stable home, shows I have a partner to help raise them. This is madness." Wade sat beside her on the cot. "Miss Whitfield, you helped me when no one else would. You gave me work when this whole town turned its back. Let me return the favor, by destroying both our lives, by giving us both a fighting chance." Mary Ann was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Why would you do this? You barely know me." Wade thought about Ethan, about the river, about 15 months of running from the one thing he should have faced. "Because someone has to stop running," he said finally. "Someone has to stand and fight." Mary Ann looked at him with those gray eyes searching his face. "If we do this, it has to be real, not just on paper. We'd have to make people believe it. I know. And you'd be tied to me, to my problems, to the danger Charles represents. I know that too. Marianne stood and moved to the window. She looked out at the dark cemetery. I never wanted to marry for convenience. I did that once. It nearly killed me. This is different, Wade said. This is choosing for ourselves. Marianne turned. Is it, or are we just two desperate people making a terrible mistake? Wade had no answer for that, but he stood and held out his hand. Maybe we are, or maybe we're two people who see each other clearly enough to know we're both worth saving. Marianne looked at his hand for a long moment. Then she took it. God help us both, she whispered. Wade squeezed her hand gently. He will, or he won't. Either way, we face it together. They stood there in the lamplight, two broken people making impossible promises, and something shifted in the air between them. Not love, not yet, but something that might grow into it given time. The next morning, Wade woke to find Marianne gone. For a moment he feared she had left town run again rather than face what was coming. Then he saw the note on the cot, gone to confront Charles. If I don't return by noon, it means he's taking me back to Boston. Thank you for trying. Emser Wade dressed in seconds and ran to the hotel. He found Marianne in the lobby standing very still while a man in an expensive suit gripped her arm. The man was handsome in a cold way, with pale eyes and a smile that never reached them. Darling, the man was saying, his voice smooth as oil, don't make a scene. We're leaving this afternoon and that's final. Let go of her, Wade said. The man, Charles Hendrick, turned. And who are you? Someone who's asking you politely to release the lady. Charles laughed. The lady? This is my wife, friend. I suggest you move along before you embarrass yourself. Wade stepped closer. I suggest you take your hands off her before I remove them for you. Charles's smile vanished. His grip on Marianne tightened. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A man who beats women because it makes him feel strong. Charles's face flushed red. He released Marianne and stepped toward Wade. You dare speak to me like that? Wade held his ground. Leave Kearney, today, and don't come back. Or what? You'll fight me, Charles sneered. I'll have the sheriff arrest you for threatening me. Before Wade could respond, Marianne spoke. Her voice was steady, clear. You won't have me arrested, Charles. Because I'm going to tell the sheriff exactly what you did to me in Boston. I'm going to show him the scars, and I'm going to press charges for assault. Charles turned on her. You wouldn't dare. Your reputation would be ruined. My reputation is already ruined, Marianne said. You saw to that. But yours isn't. Yet. How would it look if word got back to Boston that you beat your wife, that she ran away, and you chased her across the country like a dog? That's slander. It's truth. And I have witnesses. Wade watched. Marianne saw the strength that had been hiding beneath her fear. She continued, her voice gaining power. You have a choice, Charles. Leave now quietly and we both walk away. Or stay and fight and watch your precious reputation crumble. Charles looked between them, calculation in his eyes. Then he smiled, slow and cruel. You think you've won. But you're still my wife, Marianne, legally bound to me, and I have resources you can't imagine. I'll come back with lawyers. I'll drag you through every court from here to the Atlantic. He turned and walked toward the stairs. At the bottom he looked back. Enjoy your little victory. It won't last. After he was gone, Marianne's legs gave out. Wade caught her, helped her to a chair. She was shaking violently. Did I just make everything worse? She whispered. No, you stood up to him. That's not making it worse. But he'll come back. He meant what he said about the lawyers. Wade knelt beside her chair. Then we get married. Today. Make it harder for him to claim you. Marianne looked at him. You're serious. Dead serious. But what about Rose and Violet? What about your custody case? We'll figure it out. But first, we protect you. Marianne's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve this kindness. Neither did I. But Reverend Blackwood gave it to me anyway. Wade stood and held out his hand. What do you say, Miss Whitfield? Want to marry a broken-down groundskeeper with more problems than prospects? Despite everything, Marianne laughed. It was a small sound, fragile as glass. You certainly know how to sweep a woman off her feet, Mr. Harlan. Is that a yes? Marianne took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. It's a yes. God forgive us both. They were married that afternoon in the church with only Mrs. Blackwood and Mrs. Murphy as witnesses. The Reverend could not perform the ceremony, so they rode to the next town and found a justice of the peace who asked no questions. Wade signed his name, Mary Ann signed hers, and just like that they were bound together, two strangers trying to save each other from drowning. When they returned to Kearney, news of the marriage had already spread. Wade saw it in the faces of people they passed. Shock, disapproval, speculation. And then he saw Crawford. The older man stood outside his hotel watching them ride past. His face was unreadable, but his eyes held something cold and calculating. Wade knew what this meant. Crawford would move faster now, would use the marriage as proof that Wade was unstable, impulsive, unfit. The custody hearing was in 1 week. Wade had just made it much easier for Crawford to win. That night, Wade sat with Rose and Violet in Mrs. Murphy's parlor. He had to tell them about the marriage before they heard it from someone else. Rose listened in silence. Violet asked if this meant Mary Ann would be their mama. Not exactly, Wade said carefully. But she'll be family. Rose stood abruptly. I need to talk to you, alone. They went out onto the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood. You married her to save her, Rose said. Not for us. Wade started to deny it, then stopped. You're right, I did. So what happens to us? Rose's voice was tight with anger. What happens when grandfather's lawyer asks you in court why you married a stranger? What will you say? I'll tell the truth? The truth will lose us. Rose turned away. I thought you understood. I thought you were different. Wade moved to stand beside her. Rose, look at me, she did reluctantly. I'm not your papa. I'm not going to lie to you and say everything will be fine. Wade's voice was gentle but firm. But I need you to understand something. Mary Ann needed help. She was in danger. I couldn't walk away from that, even if it means losing us. The question hung in the air. Wade took a breath. I don't know how to make you understand this, but 15 months ago when Ethan died, I froze. I tried to save him, but when it mattered most, I wasn't fast enough, wasn't strong enough, and I've carried that every day since. Rose's face softened slightly. When Mary Ann needed help, Wade continued, I had a choice. Save myself by walking away, or try to save her and risk everything. And I couldn't walk away. Not again. Not when I had the chance to do it right this time. But we're not, Ethan, Rose whispered. We're right here. We're not drowning. No, but you're not safe either, and I won't sacrifice someone else's safety to improve my chances in court. Rose was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that broke Wade's heart. Papa said the same thing. He said he was doing what was right. And then he left us under a tree. Wade felt the weight of those words. The comparison stung because it was fair. Your papa made a terrible choice, Wade said slowly. And maybe I'm making one too, but the difference is I'm telling you the truth. I'm not pretending this is for your own good. I'm saying I made a choice that might cost us everything, and I'm asking you to understand why. Rose looked at him with tears streaming down her face. I don't want to understand. I want someone who chooses us. Just us. Nobody else. Wade pulled her into a hug. She resisted for a moment, then collapsed against him, sobbing. I know, he whispered. I know you do, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. They stood there on the porch as darkness fell, a man and a child, both carrying more weight than they should have to bear. The next morning brought the official notice. The custody hearing was scheduled for 6 days from now. Judge Eleanor Hartwell would preside. Crawford had hired the best lawyer in 3 territories. Wade had no lawyer, no money to hire one, just the truth and a prayer that it would be enough. He was in the cemetery digging a grave for a man who had died the night before when Mary Ann found him. Rose came to see me this morning, she said without preamble. Wade stopped digging. What did she say? That I ruined everything. That because of me, you're going to lose them. Wade leaned on his shovel. She's scared. She's right to be. Mary Ann's voice was tight. I've destroyed your case, Wade. I should leave. If I go back to Boston, if I let Charles take me, maybe Crawford will see that you're willing to sacrifice for the girls. No, Wade, listen to me. No. Wade climbed out of the grave and faced her. You're not going back to him. I don't care what it costs. It's going to cost you those girls. Maybe. Or maybe it's going to show them what it looks like when someone doesn't abandon people who need help. Marianne's eyes filled with tears. You're a fool, Wade Harlan. Probably, but I'm a fool who keeps his word. They stood there in the cemetery surrounded by the dead, trying to figure out how to save the living. That afternoon, Wade was called to see Reverend Blackwood. The man was failing his breathing, labored his skin gray, but his mind was still sharp. Mrs. Blackwood held the slate while her husband wrote each letter an effort. Rose came to see me. Wade's stomach dropped. What did she say? More writing. She asked if I thought you would leave them. What did you tell her? The Reverend's hand shook as he wrote the final message. I told her that good men don't always win, but they always try. And trying matters. Wade felt something break loose in his chest. Thank you. The Reverend reached out with his good hand and gripped Wade's arm. His eyes held a message clearer than any words. Fight. No matter what it costs, fight. Wade nodded. I will. 3 days before the hearing, Rose came to Wade with a secret she had been carrying. They were alone in the church. Wade was repairing a broken pew. Rose sat nearby, hands folded in her lap, building up courage. Finally she spoke. I have to tell you something about Violet. Wade set down his tools. All right, she's not Papa's daughter. Wade felt the words settle into the silence. What Rose's voice was steady but quiet. Mama had an affair before Violet was born, Papa knew. He raised Violet anyway, loved her like his own. But she's not his blood. Does Violet know? No, and Papa made me promise never to tell her. But I need to tell you because Rose's voice cracked, because Grandfather doesn't know, and if he finds out, I don't know if he'll still want both of us. Wade sat beside her. That's what you're really afraid of. Not that I'll leave you, that he'll separate you from Violet. Rose nodded, tears falling. Violet is my sister. I don't care whose blood she has. But Grandfather cares about blood, about legacy. If he finds out she's not really his granddaughter, he might only fight for me. Have you told anyone else, just you? Wade took her hand. Then that's where it stays. This is Violet's story to know when she's ready. Not before. But what if Grandfather finds out? What if he investigates? Then we deal with it. But we don't use it. We don't weaponize a child's parentage to win a court case. Rose looked at him with something like wonder. You mean that? I mean it. Even though it might help you win, if Grandfather knew he might give up his claim. Even then. Wade squeezed her hand. Some victories aren't worth the cost. Rose threw her arms around him and held tight. Thank you. Thank you for not being like everyone else. Wade held her and felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper into his bones. He was fighting for these girls not because he could win, but because they deserved someone who would fight, even if that fight was hopeless. 2 days before the hearing, Charles Hendrick returned to Kearney. He came with lawyers, with papers, with the full weight of the law behind him. Wade found out when the sheriff came to the church, Mr. Harlan, I need to speak with your wife. She's not here. Where is she? Teaching at the schoolhouse. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Hendrick has filed charges. Says Mrs. Harlan his wife Marianne Hendrick abandoned her lawful marriage. He's got a judge's order saying she needs to return to Boston. Wade's blood went cold. She's not going back to him. That's not your decision to make. She's legally his wife. She's legally my wife now. The sheriff looked pained. Mr. Harlan, I like you. But you can't marry a woman who's already married. That's bigamy. Your marriage isn't valid. Then we'll fight it in court. You'll lose. Sheriff's voice was kind but firm. Best thing for her is to go back file for divorce proper-like. Takes time, but it's legal. He'll kill her, Wade said flatly. Before the divorce goes through, he'll kill her. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Ask her to show you the scars. The sheriff was quiet. Then he said, I'll give you until tomorrow morning. Tell her to come see me. We'll figure something out. But if she runs, Hendrick will have me hunt her down, and that won't go well for anyone. After the sheriff left, Wade found Marianne at the schoolhouse. She was erasing the chalkboard, her movements slow and deliberate. When she saw his face, she knew. He's filed charges, hasn't he? Wade nodded. Marianne set down the eraser. Then I have to go. No, Wade, there's no other option. If I stay, you'll be charged with harboring a fugitive. You'll lose any chance with Rose and Violet. I don't care. You should. Marianne turned to face him. Those girls need you more than I do. You need someone too. I've survived this long alone. You shouldn't have to. Marianne's face crumpled. This is my fault, all of it. I should never have come here, should never have involved you. Wade crossed the room and took her hands. Listen to me. There's one way out of this. We make the marriage real. We go before Judge Hartwell at the custody hearing, and we tell her everything. About Charles, about the abuse, about why you ran. We ask her to grant an emergency annulment based on coercion and abuse. Then we remarry, properly, legally. That's insane. Why would she grant that? Because Judge Hartwell is a woman. She'll understand what the law doesn't. That sometimes marriage is a trap, not a covenant. And if she doesn't, then we tried. But at least we tried together. Marianne looked at him for a long moment. Why are you doing this? Really? Wade thought about Ethan, about the river, about 15 months of carrying guilt. Because when I couldn't save Ethan, I ran. I let guilt destroy me instead of using it to save someone else. He met her eyes. I won't make that mistake again, even if it costs me everything. Those girls are your everything. No. Wade's voice was soft but certain. Doing what's right is my everything. The girls are part of that. But so are you. Marianne's tears fell freely now. You're either the best man I've ever known or the biggest fool. Wade smiled sadly. Probably both. They stood there in the empty schoolhouse, two people bound together by desperation and something that might grow into love if they survived long enough to let it. Outside, the sun was setting. Tomorrow would bring the hearing that would decide everything. Wade thought about Rose and Violet sleeping peacefully at Mrs. Murphy's, unaware of how precarious their future was. He thought about Crawford preparing his case with expensive lawyers and righteous certainty. He thought about Charles Hendrick waiting like a spider for the law to deliver Marianne back into his web. And he thought about himself, a broken man trying to save everyone when he had barely learned to save himself. The odds were impossible, the outcome almost certainly tragic. But Wade had learned something in the past weeks, had learned it from Rose's quiet strength, from Violet's innocent trust, from Marianne's desperate courage. Sometimes the fight itself mattered more than the victory. Sometimes standing your ground was enough, even if you fell doing it. Tomorrow would bring judgment. But tonight Wade had kept his promises, had chosen to stay when running would have been easier, had fought for people who needed someone to fight for them. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The ghosts we carry don't disappear, but sometimes, if we're brave enough, we can turn them into reasons to fight instead of reasons to run. Wade locked the schoolhouse and walked back to the church with Marianne beside him. Neither of them spoke. Words seemed inadequate for what was coming, but their hands found each other in the darkness. And that small connection, that choice to face the storm together, felt like the truest thing Wade had done in 15 months. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tonight brought only the courage to face them. And sometimes courage was all you had. Sometimes it was enough. The night before the hearing, Wade could not sleep. He lay on the narrow cot in his small room behind the church and stared at the ceiling while his mind turned over impossible choices. Through the window he could see the cemetery bathed in moonlight rows of headstones casting long shadows across the grass. Somewhere in that darkness was Ethan's grave, the boy who had forgiven him before dying, the boy whose death had sent Wade running for 15 months. And now Wade was about to face another kind of death, the death of hope maybe, the death of the fragile family he had tried to build from broken pieces. In the morning, Judge Eleanor Hartwell would decide everything. Whether Rose and Violet would go to Crawford, whether Marianne would be forced back to Boston and the husband who had beaten her, whether Wade's choices had saved anyone or simply destroyed them all more slowly. He rose before dawn and dressed in the dark. His hands shook as he buttoned his shirt. Not from fear, though fear was there, but from the simple, terrible knowledge that he had done everything he could and it still might not be enough. Wade walked out into the cemetery as the first gray light touched the eastern sky. His feet carried him without conscious thought to Ethan's grave. The headstone was small, simple. The carved lamb that marked it as a child's resting place looked peaceful in the pre-dawn stillness. Wade knelt in the dew-wet grass. He had avoided this grave for weeks, even while tending every other one in the cemetery. Had looked at it from a distance, but never approached. Now, with everything about to fall apart, he found himself here. "I don't know what to do," Wade said quietly to the stone. "The hearing is today. I might lose them, probably will lose them, and it's my fault for making the choices I made." The wind moved through the grass, carrying the scent of earth and growing things. "I married Marianne to save her," Wade continued. "And I know that's going to cost me Rose and Violet. Crawford's lawyers will paint me as reckless, unstable. They'll say I care more about a stranger than about the girls I'm supposed to be fighting for." He touched the carved lamb with gentle fingers. "But here's what I can't explain to anyone. If I had walked away from Marianne to improve my chances in court, I would have become the kind of man who doesn't deserve those girls anyway." He paused. "Does that make sense? Am I just justifying my own failure?" Silence answered him, the kind of silence that feels like listening. "Your father forgave me," Wade said. "Your mother forgave me. But I still see your face every night, still feel your weight in my arms when the current pulled us under, and I think maybe I'm not supposed to forget. Maybe I'm supposed to carry you with me, not as punishment, but as reminder." The sky was lightening now, stars fading into blue. Reminder of what it costs to fail. Reminder that trying isn't always enough, but also reminder that trying matters, that showing up matters. That being present when it's easier to run, that's the only kind of courage some of us ever get. Wade stood slowly, his knees protesting. He looked at the grave for a long moment. "I'm going to lose today, I know that. But I'm going to stand there and fight anyway. For Rose, for Violet, for Marianne, for everyone who needs someone to stand when standing seems pointless." He turned to leave, then looked back one final time. "Thank you for forgiving me, even if I never quite forgive myself." The sun broke over the horizon as Wade walked back to the church. Golden light spilled across the cemetery, touching each stone, each name, each story of a life lived and ended. Wade felt the weight of all those endings and all those stories. But he also felt something else, something that had been growing quietly in the weeks since he stopped running. Not peace exactly, but acceptance. The understanding that some things could not be fixed, only carried, and that carrying them with intention was its own kind of redemption. Mrs. Blackwood was waiting at the church with breakfast and a clean suit that had belonged to her husband. She helped Wade into it, adjusting the collar and smoothing the shoulders like a mother preparing her son for something important. "Samuel wanted you to wear this today," she said. "He always said a man stands taller in a good suit. I'll return it after." Mrs. Blackwood's smile was sad. "Keep it, Mr. Harlan. He would want you to have it. How is he today?" "The same, fading a little more each day." She touched Wade's cheek gently. "But he knows you're fighting. That matters to him." Wade nodded, not trusting his voice. At Mrs. Murphy's boarding house, Marianne was helping Rose and Violet dress. The older woman had found clean dresses for both girls mended and pressed. Rose stood very still while Marianne braided her hair, her face pale and set. Violet chattered nervously, asking questions nobody could answer. "Will the judge be nice? Will we get to talk? What if grandfather cries?" Marianne answered with patience Wade could not have managed. Her own hands were steady, despite the terror Wade knew she must be feeling. Today would decide her fate as much as the girls. Charles Hendrick was in town waiting. His lawyers had filed motions. If Wade's marriage to Marianne was ruled invalid, if she was ordered back to Boston, there would be nothing Wade could do to stop it. They gathered in Mrs. Murphy's parlor, Wade in the Reverend's suit, Marianne in a simple gray dress that made her look older, more severe. Rose in blue calico with her hair braided tight. Violet in yellow gingham, her golden curls brushed until they shone. A family assembled from spare parts and desperate choices. Mrs. Murphy looked at them with something like pride. "You look respectable. That's half the battle. The other half is the truth," Wade said. "Sometimes the truth isn't enough," Mrs. Murphy replied, "but it's all we've got." They walked to the courthouse together. The whole town seemed to be watching. People lined the street, whispering behind hands, pointing. Wade kept his eyes forward and his hand steady on Rose's shoulder. Crawford was already there, standing on the courthouse steps with his lawyers. 3 men in expensive suits carrying leather cases full of documents and precedents. They looked at Wade's small group with barely concealed contempt. Crawford himself looked different than Wade had seen him before, older, tired. His face was drawn, and his eyes held something Wade could not quite identify. Grief, maybe, or resignation. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with townspeople who had come to watch the spectacle. Wade saw familiar faces: Dr. Kensington, the sheriff, store owners who had refused to hire him, ranch hands who had turned him away. Judge Eleanor Hartwell entered, and the room fell silent. She was a woman in her late 40s, with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had been a lawyer before becoming a judge, one of the few women to break into that profession. Her reputation for fairness was matched only by her reputation for severity. She took her seat and surveyed the courtroom with those sharp eyes. This is a custody hearing regarding Rose Carter, age 8, and Violet Carter, age 5. Mr. Silas Crawford has petitioned for guardianship as the children's maternal grandfather. Mr. Wade Harlan currently has temporary custody and is contesting the petition. Judge Hartwell looked at both parties. Before we begin, I want to make something clear. This court cares about one thing and one thing only: what is in the best interest of these children, not what's convenient, not what's traditional, what's best. She nodded to Crawford's lead lawyer. Mr. Preston, you may present your case. The lawyer stood tall and confident. Your Honor, the facts of this case are simple. Mr. Crawford is the children's grandfather. He has a substantial estate, the means to provide excellent care, and the legal right as their closest living relative. He outlined Crawford's case with practiced efficiency: the ranch, the stable income, the tutors Crawford would hire, the life of comfort and security he could offer. Mr. Harlan, on the other hand, is a drifter with a questionable past. He was present when a child drowned 15 months ago. He has no permanent residence beyond a room in a church. His income is $25 a month. And 3 days ago he married a woman who is already legally married to another man. Preston let that last statement hang in the air. That's right, Your Honor. Mr. Harlan's marriage to Miss Whitfield is invalid because she is still married to Mr. Charles Hendrick of Boston. This shows not only poor judgment, but a blatant disregard for the law. Judge Hartwell's expression did not change. Is Mr. Hendrick present? He is, Your Honor. Preston gestured, and Charles Hendrick stood from the gallery. He looked every inch the wronged husband, dignified, sorrowful, respectable. Judge Hartwell studied him for a moment. We'll address that matter separately. Continue, Mr. Preston. The lawyer presented documents: financial statements showing Crawford's wealth, letters from prominent citizens vouching for his character, medical reports on the girls showing they were malnourished and neglected when found. Each piece of evidence was a nail in Wade's coffin. When Preston finished, Judge Hartwell turned to Wade. Mr. Harlan, do you have legal representation? Wade stood. No, Your Honor. I'm representing myself. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Hartwell's eyes narrowed slightly. You understand you're at a significant disadvantage, I understand, Your Honor. But I couldn't afford a lawyer, and I believe the truth speaks for itself. Very well. Present your case. Wade had no documents, no character witnesses beyond Mrs. Murphy and Mrs. Blackwood, who sat in the front row. He had only his words and the hope that they would matter. Your Honor, I'm not going to pretend I'm the best choice for these girls on paper. Mr. Crawford has more money, more stability, more everything, but I'd like to explain why I'm fighting for them anyway. He told the story simply: finding the girls at the river crossing, reading Thomas Carter's letter, bringing them to Kearney, and discovering Crawford's claim. I learned that their father had made an arrangement with Mr. Crawford, that he'd left the girls where they'd be found in exchange for Crawford not pursuing legal action against him. The girls were currency in a transaction, not children being cared for. Crawford's face tightened, but he said nothing. Wade continued, I also learned that Rose was terrified of going with her grandfather. Not because he'd hurt her physically, but because she was afraid of what would happen to Violet if certain truths came out. What truths? Judge Hartwell asked. Wade hesitated. He had promised Rose he would not use this information, but the judge was asking directly. Your Honor, I'd prefer not to say. It's not relevant to my ability to care for the girls." Judge Hartwell studied him. "Very well." "What else?" Wade took a breath. "I married Mary Ann Whitfield 3 days ago. Mr. Preston is correct that she has a legal husband in Boston, but what he didn't mention is why she left that husband." Wade gestured to Mary Ann. She stood, her face pale but determined. "Miss Whitfield," Judge Hartwell said, "tell me about your marriage to Mr. Hendrick." Mary Ann's voice was steady. "We were married 2 years ago in Boston. It was arranged by our families to settle a debt. From the beginning, Charles was violent. He beat me regularly, told me it was his right as my husband." Charles Hendrick stood. "That's a lie, Your Honor. My wife is unstable, prone to hysteria. I've brought medical documentation." Judge Hartwell held up a hand. "You'll have your turn, mister." "Hendrick, sit down." Hendrick sat his jaw tight. "Continue, Miss Whitfield. 6 months ago I ran. I came west hoping to disappear, but Charles found me. 3 days ago he came to Kearney and told me I had to return to Boston or he'd have me arrested for desertion. And Mr. Harlan married you to prevent that." "Yes, Your Honor." Mary Ann's voice broke slightly. "He knew it would hurt his case for the girls, but he married me anyway because I had nowhere else to turn." Judge Hartwell looked at Wade. "Is that true, Mr. Harlan?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Why would you sabotage your own case?" Wade thought about how to explain. "Because if I'd walked away from someone in danger to improve my legal position, I would have proven I don't deserve to raise those girls. They need someone who does the right thing, even when it costs everything." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Judge Hartwell made a note. "I'll take this under advisement, Mr. Preston. Any other witnesses?" "Just one, Your Honor. We call Rose Carter to the stand." Rose stood. She looked impossibly small walking to the witness chair. The bailiff had to adjust the height so she could be seen over the railing. Judge Hartwell's voice softened. "Hello, Rose. Do you understand why you're here?" "Yes, ma'am." "You're deciding where Violet and I should live." "That's right. I'm going to ask you some questions. Just answer honestly." "All right, yes, ma'am." Preston approached first. "Rose, do you know who Mr. Crawford is?" "He's our grandfather, our mama's father." "And has he been kind to you?" Rose hesitated. "Yes, sir." "Does he love you?" "He says he does." "But you don't want to live with him. Why is that?" Rose looked at Wade, then back at Preston. "Because he wants us for the wrong reasons." "What reasons are those?" Rose's voice was quiet but clear. "Because he feels guilty about Mama dying. He thinks if he takes care of us, it will make up for what happened to her. But that's not love. That's just trying to fix his own feelings." Crawford made a sound like he'd been struck. Preston pressed on. "But Mr. Harlan is a stranger. You've only known him a few weeks. How do you know he's not just trying to fix his own feelings, too?" Rose looked directly at Preston. "Because Mr. Harlan knows he can't fix what happened to the boy who died. He's not trying to replace that boy with us. He's just trying to do better next time." The simplicity of it silenced the room. Judge Hartwell leaned forward. "Rose, what do you want?" "If you could choose, where would you live with Mr. Harlan and Miss Mary Ann?" "Why?" "Because they chose us. Not because we're useful or because we make them feel better about themselves. They chose us even when it made their lives harder." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "That's what family should be. People who choose you when choosing you costs them something." Preston tried to recover. "But Mr. Crawford can give you things, mister. Harlan cannot. Education, opportunity, a real home." Rose shook her head. "We already have a real home. It's not a place. It's the people who stay." Preston sat down, recognizing defeat. Judge Hartwell looked at Rose with something that might have been respect. "One more question, child. Is there anything else you think I should know?" Rose glanced at Crawford. He was staring at his hands, his shoulders shaking slightly. Rose made a decision then. Wade saw it in her face. The moment she chose truth over fear. "Your Honor, there's something Grandfather doesn't know about Violet." The courtroom went very still. Rose Wade said quietly, "You don't have to." Rose looked at him. "Yes, I do." She turned back to Judge Hartwell. "Violet isn't Papa's daughter. Mama had an affair before Violet was born. Papa knew, but he raised her anyway. I've been scared to tell anyone because I thought if Grandfather knew he wouldn't want both of us anymore." Every eye in the room turned to Crawford. The old man's face was unreadable. "Is that true, Mr. Crawford?" Judge Hartwell asked. Crawford stood slowly. His voice, when it came, was rough with emotion. "I've known since the day Catherine died. She told me in the final moments, made me promise I'd take care of both her daughters, not just the one with my blood." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Hartwell's gavel cracked. "Order." Silence fell. Crawford continued, his voice stronger now. "Rose, you think I'd abandon your sister because of blood? You think I'm that kind of man?" Rose's tears fell freely. "I don't know what kind of man you are. Grandfather, you scared Papa so bad he left us under a tree. You used lawyers and threats to get what you wanted." How was I supposed to know? Crawford's face crumpled. He sat down, heavily covering his face with his hands. His shoulders shook with sobs. Judge Hartwell waited. The whole room waited. Finally, Crawford lowered his hands. His face was wet, ravaged. "I've made mistakes. Terrible mistakes." He looked at Rose. "Your mother died because I worked her too hard. I knew she was pregnant. I knew she was struggling. But the ranch needed workers, and I needed money, and I put all of that ahead of my daughter's life." His voice broke. "When she died, when I held her hand and felt her slip away, I swore I'd make it right somehow, that I'd take care of her children the way I failed to take care of her. But you're right, Rose. I've been trying to fix my own guilt, not love you for who you are." Crawford stood and faced Judge Hartwell. "I withdraw my petition for custody." The courtroom exploded. Judge Hartwell's gavel cracked repeatedly. "Order, order in this court." When silence returned, Judge Hartwell looked at Crawford. "You're certain, Mr. Crawford, I am, Your Honor. Those girls deserve better than a guilty old man trying to buy redemption." He looked at Wade. "They deserve someone who chose them freely, not from obligation or guilt, but from genuine care." Wade felt something tight in his chest release. But Crawford wasn't finished. "Your Honor, I'd like to request visitation rights, not as a guardian, but as their grandfather. I want to be part of their lives, to know them, to let them know me, faults and all." Judge Hartwell made a note. "That can be arranged if Mr. Harlan consents." Wade nodded. "Of course." Before Judge Hartwell could continue, the courtroom doors opened. A man entered, moving slowly. He was thin, gaunt, leaning heavily on a crutch. His right leg ended at the knee, the pant leg pinned up. His face was weathered and pale, but his eyes were clear. Rose gasped. Papa Thomas Carter made his way down the aisle. Every eye followed him. He reached the front and steadied himself against a bench. "Your Honor, forgive the interruption. My name is Thomas Carter. I'm the father of Rose and Violet." Judge Hartwell studied him. "Mr. Carter, we were told you were dead. Nearly was." Thomas's voice was weak but determined. "Gangrene took my leg, nearly took my life, but I survived." "Why didn't you come for your daughters?" Thomas's face twisted with pain. "Because I didn't deserve them. I abandoned them under a tree like unwanted kittens. I made a deal with Crawford to save my own skin." "What kind of father does that?" "The kind who was desperate and dying," Judge Hartwell said quietly. "What do you want, mister?" Carter Thomas looked at Rose and Violet. Violet had started crying, reaching for him. Rose sat frozen, her face unreadable. "I want to testify on behalf of Wade," Harlan Thomas said. "I want the court to know that he's a better man than I ever was, that those girls are safer with him than they ever were with me." Preston stood. "Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Carter abandoned his legal responsibilities. His testimony shouldn't carry weight. Overruled." Judge Hartwell's voice was sharp. "Mr. Carter, tell me about Wade Harlan." Thomas turned to look at Wade. "I've never met him before today, but I've heard about him from letters Mrs. Blackwood sent me while I was recovering in Omaha. I know he found my girls when he could have ridden past. I know he fought for them when everyone told him to give up. I know he married a woman in danger, even though it would cost him custody." Thomas's voice grew stronger. "That's the kind of man I wish I'd been. The kind who does right even when it's hard, even when it costs everything. My daughters deserve that kind of man raising them." "And what about you?" Judge Hartwell asked. "Do you want your daughters back?" Thomas's face crumpled. "More than anything. But wanting them isn't the same as deserving them. I gave up my rights when I left them under that tree, and I'm here to make it official." He pulled papers from his coat. "These are signed documents relinquishing all parental rights. I had a lawyer draw them up in Omaha. He handed them to the bailiff. I want Wade Harlan to have full legal custody, not shared, not temporary, full. Rose stood from the witness chair. She walked slowly to where Thomas stood. He looked down at her, tears streaming. "I'm sorry, baby girl, I'm so sorry." Rose stared at him for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice small but clear. "I forgive you, Papa, but I choose him." She pointed at Wade. Thomas nodded, sobbing. "I know you do." "And that's exactly right." Rose turned away from her father and walked to Wade. She took his hand and stood beside him, her choice made visible for the entire courtroom to see. Violet ran from her seat to Thomas, throwing her arms around his good leg. "Papa, don't leave again." Thomas knelt awkwardly, balancing on his crutch. He held Violet close. "I'm not leaving, Letty. I'll be here in Kearney. I'll visit. I'll be part of your life, but Mr. Harlan is your papa now. You understand?" Violet looked at Wade, then back at Thomas. "Can I have two papas?" Thomas smiled through his tears. "Yeah, honey, I think you can." Judge Hartwell let the moment settle. Then she spoke. "This court will take a 30-minute recess. When we return, I'll deliver my ruling." She stood and left. The courtroom erupted in conversation. Wade stood frozen, Rose's hand in his, watching Thomas hold Violet. Crawford sat alone, his face in his hands. Marianne moved to Wade's side, her presence steady and grounding. "It's not over yet," she whispered. "I know. But we have a chance." Wade squeezed her hand. "We have more than that. We have the truth." The 30 minutes felt like hours. Wade, Marianne, and the girls waited in a side room. Thomas joined them, moving slowly on his crutch. The air was thick with things unsaid. Finally, Rose spoke. "Papa, why did you really leave us at that river crossing?" Thomas sat heavily. He looked old beyond his years. "Because I knew Crawford was going to find us eventually. He had men looking, and I knew when he did there'd be a fight in court I couldn't win." "So you made a deal with him," Rose said. Thomas shook his head. "No, I made it look like I made a deal with him. I told Crawford I'd leave you somewhere public where you'd be found. He thought I meant by his men, but I chose that specific spot for a reason." Wade felt something click into place. The river crossing. "Where Ethan died." Thomas looked at Wade. "Mrs. Blackwood told me about you in one of her letters before I even got sick. Told me about a young man who'd tried to save her stepson and failed. Who'd been running from his guilt ever since. She said you were a good man, broken by one terrible moment." Wade's throat tightened. "I gambled everything on the hope that you'd come back to Kearney eventually, that you'd be at that crossing because it meant something to you. And that when you saw my girls you wouldn't be able to walk away. You gambled your children's lives on a hope." Marianne's voice was sharp. Thomas met her eyes. "I gambled on grief making a man careful, on guilt making him brave, on someone who'd failed once, doing everything in his power not to fail again." He looked at Wade. "And I was right." The bailiff knocked. "Judge is ready." They filed back into the courtroom. Judge Hartwell sat at her bench, papers arranged before her. Her face was unreadable. "I've reviewed the evidence and testimony. This is one of the more unusual cases I've presided over. We have a grandfather withdrawing his petition, a biological father relinquishing rights, a questionable marriage, and two children caught in the middle of adult decisions." She looked at Rose and Violet. "But at the center of all this complexity is a simple question. Who will best serve the interests of these children?" Judge Hartwell's gaze moved to Wade. "Mr. Harlan, you have no money, no property, no legal training. You're living in a room behind a church and working for wages barely sufficient to feed yourself, let alone two growing girls." Wade's heart sank. "But you also have something that cannot be bought or inherited. You have the willingness to sacrifice your own interests for theirs. You've demonstrated that repeatedly. And while that's not usually enough in this case, combined with Mr. Crawford's withdrawal and Mr. Carter's relinquishment, it tips the balance." Wade felt the room spin. "I'm granting you full legal custody of Rose and Violet Carter, with certain conditions." Judge Hartwell looked at Marianne. "Miss Whitfield or Mrs. Harlan or whatever we're calling you, Your marriage to Mr. Harlan is legally invalid due to your existing marriage to Mr. Hendrick. However, I'm issuing an emergency order annulling your marriage to Mr. Hendrick on grounds of coercion and domestic abuse." Charles Hendrick shot to his feet. "You can't do that. I just did." Judge Hartwell's voice was ice. "Furthermore, I'm issuing a restraining order. Mr. Hendrick, you are to stay at least 500 yards from Miss Whitfield at all times. You are to leave Kearney immediately and not return. Violation will result in arrest, but she's my wife, not anymore." Judge Hartwell's gavel cracked. "Bailiff, escort Mr. Hendrick from my courtroom." 2 deputies moved forward. Hendrick's face went purple with rage, but he left without further protest. Judge Hartwell turned back to Wade and Marianne. "You two will remarry, properly this time, within 30 days. The custody order is contingent on that marriage taking place and remaining intact for a minimum of 1 year. This court wants to see stability, not just good intentions." "Yes, Your Honor," Wade managed. "Mr. Crawford, you're granted visitation rights, 1 afternoon per week, to be arranged with Mr. Harlan. You will not attempt to undermine his authority or turn the children against him." "Clear." "Crystal clear, Your Honor." Crawford's voice was humble. "Thank you. And Mr. Carter." Judge Hartwell's expression softened. "You're also granted visitation. I recommend you use that time to build a relationship with your daughters that's based on honesty rather than guilt." "I will, Your Honor." Judge Hartwell looked at the entire courtroom. "Let this case stand as precedent. Family is not defined solely by blood or law or tradition. Family is defined by choice, by commitment, by the willingness to stand when standing is hard. Mr. Harlan has demonstrated that more thoroughly than any blood relative could." Her gavel fell. Case dismissed. Custody granted. The courtroom erupted. Wade stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Marianne's arms went around him. Rose and Violet crashed into them both, holding tight. Through the crowd, Wade saw Thomas standing alone, leaning on his crutch. Their eyes met. Thomas nodded once, a gesture of respect and gratitude and goodbye. Then Crawford appeared. The old man stood before Wade, his hat in his hands. "Thank you for not turning me away completely," he said quietly. "I don't deserve access to those girls, but I'm grateful for it." Wade extended his hand. "They need to know all the people who love them, even the imperfect ones." Crawford shook his hand. "That includes you, Harlan, especially me." Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun was bright and warm. Wade stood on the steps with Marianne on one side and Rose and Violet on the other. Behind them, Thomas and Crawford stood together in awkward alliance. Mrs. Murphy appeared with a basket. "I thought you might want to celebrate. There's a spot by the river that's nice this time of day." They walked together through town. People stared, but Wade didn't care. His family was whole. Broken, yes. Complicated, certainly. But whole. At the river crossing where he'd found the girls, they spread a blanket. Mrs. Murphy unpacked bread and cheese and apples. Simple food that tasted like grace. Rose sat between Wade and Thomas, splitting her attention. Violet played at the water's edge, laughing when minnows darted around her toes. Papa Rose said to Thomas, "Why that place? Why that exact spot?" Thomas looked at the water, because it was a place of endings, where that boy died, where Wade's old life ended. "I figured it might also be a place of beginnings." "Was it?" Thomas smiled sadly. "Look around you, baby girl." What do you think? Rose looked at Wade, at Marianne, at the strange family assembled on the riverbank. Her smile was small, but real. Yeah, I think it was. As the sun lowered, they packed up. Thomas said goodbye, promising to visit the following week. Crawford did the same, his leave taking awkward but sincere. Mrs. Murphy walked back to town with Rose and Violet, giving Wade and Marianne a moment alone. They stood at the water's edge, watching the current move. "We have to get married again," Marianne said. "Properly this time." Wade took her hand. "Is that what you want?" Marianne was quiet. "When I married Charles, I had no choice. When I married you, it was desperation." This time she turned to look at him. "This time, it's a choice. And what are you choosing? A partnership, a family. A man who does the right thing even when it costs him everything." She paused. "That's not love, not yet. But it's something that could become love given time." Wade squeezed her hand. "Then let's give it time." They walked back to town as twilight fell. The church was quiet when they arrived. Wade lit a lamp in his small room and sat on the edge of his cot. Through the window, he could see Ethan's grave in the cemetery, the stone that had haunted him for 15 months. But now looking at it, Wade felt something different, not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. The understanding that he could carry this grief without being crushed by it, could honor Ethan's memory by protecting the living instead of mourning the dead. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Rose stood there in her nightgown barefoot. "Can't sleep?" Wade asked. Rose shook her head. She came in and sat beside him on the cot. "Are you happy?" she asked. Wade thought about it. "I'm not sure I know what happy feels like anymore. But I'm at peace. That's close enough." Rose leaned against him. "Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for giving me a reason not to." They sat in comfortable silence. Outside, the night settled over Kearney. Somewhere in that darkness, Thomas was finding a room to rent. Crawford was returning to his ranch. Mary Ann was sleeping in the church's upper room. All of them orbiting around this fragile thing Wade and Rose and Violet had built together, this chosen family that defied every convention and somehow worked anyway. Rose spoke again, her voice sleepy. "Mr. Harlan Wade, can I call you Dad now? Or is it still too soon?" Wade felt his throat close. "You can call me whatever feels right." Rose was quiet for a moment. Then Dad. The words settled into the space between them. Simple, profound, true. "Yeah, honey, I'm glad you stopped at that river." Wade pulled her close. "Me too, Rose, me too." She fell asleep against him. Wade sat holding her, this child who had chosen him, and felt the weight of 15 months of running finally lift from his shoulders. He looked out the window at Ethan's grave visible in the moonlight. The stone that had haunted him was still there, but now it felt different. Not a monument to failure, but a reminder that trying mattered. Tomorrow would come. And for the first time in 15 months, Wade was ready for it. 6 months later, the cemetery at Kearney looked different. Wade had spent the autumn tending it with new care, planting flowers that would bloom in spring. Each grave now had a marker that was level and clean, each plot free of weeds. He stood at Ethan's grave on a Sunday afternoon, placing fresh wildflowers at the base of the stone. Rose and Violet played nearby, their voices carrying across the quiet space. Footsteps approached. Wade looked up to see Crawford, well-dressed as always, but somehow softer around the edges. "Afternoon, Harlan?" Crawford. The old man stood beside Wade, looking at Ethan's grave. "The boy who started all this in a way." Wade nodded. "Everything connects. We just don't always see how." Crawford gestured to where the girls played. "They look happy. They are. Most days. And you?" Wade considered. "Getting there." More footsteps. Thomas appeared, moving easier now on his prosthetic leg. He'd been working odd jobs in town, saving money, trying to build something resembling a life. The three men stood together in awkward camaraderie. The father who'd abandoned, the grandfather who'd tried to control, the stranger who'd chosen to stay. "This is strange," Thomas said. "The three of us here." "Life is strange," Crawford replied. "We just have to decide if we're going to fight it or flow with it." Wade looked at both of them. "You're both welcome at dinner tonight. Mary Ann's making stew." "I'd like that," Thomas said quietly. Crawford nodded, "as would I." From across the cemetery, Violet's voice rang out. "Dad, come see what Rose found." Wade smiled. The words still caught him off guard sometimes, still felt like grace he hadn't earned. "Coming, honey?" He started to walk away, then turned back. "You're both coming right." 6 o'clock, we'll be there, Crawford said. Thomas just nodded, emotion clear on his face. Wade joined his daughters, leaving the two older men standing among the graves. As he walked away, he heard Crawford's voice, quiet but carrying. "We're lucky, you know, that he didn't give up." Thomas's response was equally soft. "He's lucky we gave him a reason not to." Wade pretended not to hear, but he smiled. That evening, the small house Wade had rented near the church was full of people and noise and life. Mary Ann had outdone herself with dinner. The table was crowded with Thomas Crawford, Mrs. Murphy, Mrs. Blackwood, and the girls. They ate and talked and laughed. It wasn't perfect. Thomas and Crawford still had moments of awkward tension. The girls still had nightmares sometimes. Marianne still flinched at loud noises. But they were trying, all of them, trying to be a family assembled from broken pieces. After dinner, Violet climbed into Marianne's lap. The gesture was so natural now that Wade barely noticed. But then Violet asked a question that made everyone freeze. "Miss Marianne, can I call you Mama? Rose says I should ask first." Marianne's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Wade. He nodded. "If you want to, honey, I'd be honored." Violet smiled bright and beautiful. "Okay, Mama." The word hung in the air. Marianne held Violet close and cried quietly into her golden curls. Rose appeared at Wade's elbow. She had something in her hand, a piece of paper old and creased. "What's that?" Wade asked. "The letter Papa left with us." Rose unfolded it carefully. "I've been carrying it all this time, but I think maybe it's time to let it go." Wade took the letter. "Read Thomas's desperate words again, the plea for someone to help his daughters." He looked at Thomas across the room. The man was watching, his face unreadable. "Can I tell you something?" Rose asked quietly. "Of course. Papa didn't just hope someone would find us. He knew." Rose's voice was matter-of-fact. "He told me before he left. He said he'd watched you for days coming back to Kearney. He knew you'd be at that river crossing eventually, and he knew when you saw us, you wouldn't leave." Wade stared at her. "He planned it," Rose nodded. "He said sometimes the best parents aren't the ones who give birth, they're the ones who choose to stay." Wade looked at Thomas again. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Thomas raised his glass slightly in salute. Wade raised his in return. Later, after everyone had gone home and the girls were in bed, Wade and Marianne sat on their small porch. The night was cool, stars bright overhead. "This is real, isn't it?" Marianne said. "This family we've built." Wade took her hand. "It's real. I keep waiting for it to fall apart. It might." Wade's honesty had become one of the foundations of their marriage. "Nothing's guaranteed, but we'll face it together if it does." Marianne leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, you know." "I don't think I've said that yet." Wade felt the words settle into his chest. Warm and true. "I love you too." When did you know Wade thought about it? When you stood up to Charles in that hotel lobby? When you refused to run anymore? That's when I knew you were the strongest person I'd ever met. And that made you love me. That made me want to be worthy of you. They sat in silence, holding hands, watching the stars wheel overhead. Inside, their daughters slept peacefully. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they had this: peace, family, home. Not the home Wade had been born into, not the home he'd dreamed of as a young man, but the home he'd built with his own hands from broken pieces and desperate choices. The kind of home that mattered, the kind worth fighting for. Wade thought about Ethan one more time, about the river and the drowning and the 15 months of running. He thought about the guilt that had driven him and the redemption he'd found not by forgetting, but by remembering. By carrying his ghosts with intention, by letting them remind him what mattered. "Thank you," Wade whispered to the darkness, to Ethan, to the Reverend, to all the people who had forgiven him when he couldn't forgive himself. Marianne squeezed his hand. "What are you thankful for?" Wade looked at the house where his daughters slept, at his wife beside him, at the life he'd stumbled into by stopping when wisdom said to keep moving. Everything he said simply, all of it, and he meant it. Wade Harlan had learned what redemption looked like. Not in forgetting the past, but in honoring it by protecting the present. Not in running from ghosts, but in letting them walk beside him as reminders of what mattered. He had failed once. The river had taught him that trying wasn't always enough, but the crossing had taught him something else. That showing up mattered, that choosing to stay when staying was hardest was its own kind of victory. And sometimes that was everything.